So I've been thinking about the Kalam cosmological argument and how it basically tries to say that everything that exists, well, no, I mean everything that begins to exist has to have some sort of like cause. And with that, they would place in support that God must have created the universe and everything. But then I thought about it more, and I'm like, what does it actually mean for something to begin to exist, so to speak? Because if God is supposedly this thing that's like uncaused and he created things that were caused, aren't things that are caused dependent upon something that is uncaused, which would be God in this case? So, to what degree is, let's say, God, who's supposedly an uncaused being, separated from the notion that he created things that are material, natural, that are caused and dependent upon within each other? Where exactly is that separation, and yet supposedly the thing that's uncaused is responsible for the things that are supposedly caused? Because if you're saying that things that are, caused within one another are incapable of existing on their own without something that's uncaused, then I'm trying to like make sense as to how both of these ideas can be combined together. Because then I started thinking about Mereological nihilism, where I guess to me I find it more logical to explain that nothing actually does begin to exist. You're already talking about things that already pre-exist. Because hypothetically, to even talk about what does or doesn't exist, aren't we talking about things that we would assume already pre-exist, just not in a way that's very clearly defined within our understanding? Because if everything that begins to exist has like some sort of cause, then I don't understand how something that is uncaused has a relation to things that need something that follow within one another. It doesn't really solve the issue of the infinite regress that a lot of religious people like to place upon people, such as myself, that don't really believe in God, because I actually do find it to make sense that the universe perhaps could come from nothing. And it's illogical to people that are religious. They would say it's illogical to say that, like, oh, something can't come from nothing. But then why not? Because presumably, if there was nothing, and then immediately it's followed by something in however which that like it exists, then arguably you wouldn't find nothing anymore, because now there is something which you would assume is, this world, this existence, and all that's left are completely natural properties that are essentially, yes, dependent upon each other within causality, the laws of physics, whatever, all this kind of stuff. But why is it outside the realm that it couldn't have come from like nothing, let's say? Because I actually find that to be less of an infinite regression. Because every single time I try to ask religious people how God exists outside of like time and space, because supposedly he invented time and space, they kind of do this cop out where it's like, oh, we're insignificant in intellect in comparison to God, so we wouldn't be able to like get and understand that. So we're supposed to just take it at face value that God is just uncaused. But then again, if we're talking about nothingness, like nothingness, quote unquote, then there is no cause to that. So doesn't it make more sense that actually something that is, non-existent can be the only catalyst for something that, quote unquote, begins to exist? Because if there's nothing, you know, being done in terms of like an existence, what would you need to put over nothing in order to have a comprehension of something that does exist? Something. So why isn't it plausible that the universe couldn't, could not have come from nothing? Like, why isn't it possible that the universe, you know, is just an accident, or let's say some sort of like, you know, coincidence? Because especially if we're considering Mereological like nihilism again, all the examples that people use in terms of like material, or like all the analogies that like they use in terms of like, oh, a painting didn't just come to be. It had to be made by like a painter. But technically that didn't even begin to exist, because let's say, oh, paint brushes, whatever, like all the material that you need to create, a painting, you know, it was to already be pre-existing to be conceived. We just developed the idea of something being whole in our mind. So you can kind of think of the universe as like no different than clay. When a sculptor or like whatever pieces something together, like with clay or whatever the fuck, to like make art, it's not really about the material itself, it's about what it represents, right? Like the symbolism, the art, and like the idea. And I think if we take it, further down the line, why is the universe like any different? Because, for example, the idea of a chair, that it's something we, use to like sit on, that concept is exactly that, a concept that like exists in our mind, but it is not inherent that a chair, something defined as something you can sit on in order to like, rest and relax, is that it is quote unquote like a chair. You can use a chair as a weapon. You can, I don't know, break apart a chair for like the wood and make something else. I don't know, maybe potentially make like a shelf out of it. It's like, again, we are the ones creating these ideas of things existing as a whole, but these things exist regardless. Like, even if we're not going to take like the ultra skeptic route and be like, maybe nothing exists, blah blah blah, it's like, even if things can exist, how do you actually properly justify that things exist in terms of like whole parts? So, to wrap it all up, I think the universe could have come from nothing, because nothing is the only excuse, yes, excuse, for something, or it's always pre existed because the universe has no actual categorization other than the arbitrary mental gymnastics that we placed upon, things that we experience. And if there are no such things as composite objects, then it doesn't require an uncaused being technically to explain why there are things that are, you know, led by one another by explanation, because that is just only something that we project.